Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and today we welcome back my father, Dr. George Schwimmer, who will be sharing his journey to become a past life therapist. Before we get started, though, I did want to make a statement from us at Sixth Sense Society about what happened and what's happening in the country with all the riots because of the murder of George Floyd. And we support the fight for justice here in the Sixth Sense Society and demand that all officers involved in his murder be held accountable. But I also want to say, remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint, and I really hope that we continue the protest by getting Donald Trump out of office in November. So keep up the good fight, everybody. I know it's really hard and chaotic out there, but I really think we can make some deeper changes as a society. So before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning into our show again. We love having you. We're inching closer and closer to our first 1,000 subscribers, which is super exciting for us. And thank you to those who have been buying us coffee on Ko-Fi and helping us to cover some of our production costs, and we truly appreciate that as well. We've got some absolutely wonderful shows coming up over the next little while. Next week, we have Jackie Smith, who is of Coventry Creations, who make those amazing spell candles, and she's going to be talking about the archetype of the witch. And so I think that that's going to be a wonderful show, and we're super excited to have the Coventry Candles people on our show. So, because we've definitely burned a lot of their candles over the years, so it's nice to find out a lot more about them. The following week, we have Reverend Jim Mcgrath coming back to talk about the miracles of Christ and, analyze them and were they really miracles and so forth. And we love Jim, so very much looking forward to his visit. And then we're going to end the month with Lama Kathy Wesley, who we absolutely love too. And she's going to join us to share some of her Buddhism thoughts and wisdom, which I think at this point we probably desperately need. So we're looking forward to those words of wisdom from Lama Kathy. So join us for that. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. And, email us or live chat with us if you have any questions. And I think this is going to be a great topic today. It's always great having Krista's dad on. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it back to Krista, and let's have a great show, guys.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. And I also want to mention that my father has been in metaphysics for over 40 years. And so there's a larger bio on the first show we did with him, and I didn't want to waste too much time on the bio, but he's been in this field before it was even popular. So welcome, Dad.
Hi.
So how are you doing right now?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. So what would you like to start with today? Did you want to start with sort of how you started your journey with the past life therapy?
No, actually, what I'm going to talk about is past life readings. I was trained to do psychic readings, which turned into past life readings, and a lot of similarities with past life therapy.
Great. So sorry, I did get that twisted up in the words. So go right ahead, jump right in.
Okay. When I was in college, either my sophomore or junior year, I ran across a mention of mystery schools and mystery teachings in Greece. And then later, same sort of thing in Egypt, and then Tibet and India. The only problem with that was nobody ever said what the mysteries were. And I've never found anything written that says what they did back then. We are again in an era of mystery teachings in the United States this time. And this apparently began in a vague sort of way with Edgar Cayce. And he formed the Association for Research and Enlightenment in 1931. Now, the Age of Aquarius supposedly was to start in the year 2000, but Cayce said that the calendars over the centuries had been tampered with, and the actual beginning of the Age of Aquarius is 1931, which incidentally is the year I was born, and I was born in an Aquarian, so that's a nice fit.
Yes.
And so Cayce formed the ARE in 1931. And as with all movements of one kind or another, nothing much happened, particularly with the Great Depression and World War II and the Korean War and so on. However, in 1956, there was an organization formed. It's called Spiritual Fronties Fellowship. And this was created by Arthur Ford, who was both a minister and the preeminent male medium of his generation, along with 49 other ministers. And they felt that the Christian churches had lost their mysticism, and they wanted to bring back mysticism along the veins of the Christianity. And so Ford founded a Spiritual Frontiers Fellowship, which was very flourishing for probably 30 years or more. And they gave retreats 3-4 times a year in the South, in the East, in the Midwest. I attended 3 of them in 1978 and 1981. Now, Ford died in 1971, and I was living in New York City at the time, and I had joined Spiritual Frontiers in 1978, and they sent out newsletters. I don't remember, it was 4 times a year or 6 times a year. Mm-hmm. And in 1981, I got a newsletter with a small article. I still remember it was at the bottom of the page, only 2 paragraphs. And it said there was somebody who was teaching mediumship. And I just started laughing. I said, oh, you can't teach somebody mediumship. That's ridiculous. You're either born with that, or a brick falls on your head, or you're struck by lightning. Nobody teaches mediumship. And but I didn't throw away the newsletter. It sat on my desk for a year. Huh. Which tells you something about, how things are conducted from the other side.
Sure.
And so I resisted going for 1.5 years, but my curiosity finally got the better of me, and I wrote to this organization. Now, this was the Arthur Ford International Academy of Mediumship, and it was founded in 1974 by Patricia Hayes, who had been a colleague and friend of Arthur Ford. And Pat had met Ford in Miami around 1963 at a Spiritual Frontiers function. And when Ford moved to Miami in 1968, she had become his secretary, working with him until his death in 1971. And Pat told us that Ford, while living, had been concerned with finding a method of providing highly accurate psychic information. And after he died, he came through in 1974 to Pat, and she said he just dropped this whole system of teaching in her head. She was driving in a car with her husband. Husband was driving, and she was sitting in the passenger seat, and she said Ford came through and just dropped all this information in her head.
Wow, that's so surreal.
Yeah, it is. So she eventually designed a 60-hour course, which included mediumship, channeling, past life regression, automatic writing, psychometry, and intuitive counseling. And at that time, I don't know if they're still doing it now, but at that time, when I went in 1982, the school handpicked its students, and each of whom developed in his or own special way. And I'll describe what happened with me. So anyway, I went June 1st of 1982, and this was in Spring Lake, North Carolina. It was a 6-day course. And during the following 6 days, 2 of the other students and Pat told me that they had known me in past lives. And I got the sense that I had known Pat and her husband, Bill Clemmer, a hypnotist, and I had known both of them in Egyptian life. So there are, spiritual connections going on here. Mm-hmm. Now, Pat told us that most psychics get information from the astral plane, but that this information was often inaccurate and colored or distorted by the attitudes, emotions, and knowledge of the psychic. In other words, it goes through their brains and through their emotions and so on. Pat said she teaches how to tap directly into the soul memories of our clients in a way that eliminated contamination by our own minds.
Is that like the Akashic Records idea? Or is it different?
That's just the whole point. Most psychics will go pick up stuff from the Akashic Records.
Oh, this is different.
This method taps into a person's soul, which sounds like, you can't do that. Well, you can. And it provides extremely accurate information. And this is going to sound crazy, particularly to any psychics who may be listening to this, but in all the years that I have used this technique, I never had anybody tell me, "Oh, that's wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." Mm-hmm. Excuse me. At the end of every reading, I would ask my client, "Was this relevant for you?" And they all said it was. So this is extremely accurate. Now, Pat told us that she not only learned to access other levels of consciousness at will, but also was able to bring an entire group of people with her to these levels. And so when Pat took the students inside, she didn't describe the journey or suggest anything. She simply led us to our destination, which were different levels inside, without telling us what to see or to expect. And some of the things I'll describe were really extraordinary. Now, on the other hand, Pat's husband, Bill Clemmer, did more traditional visualizations, giving suggestions because his background was hypnosis.
Right.
And so I'm going to read a description of one trip that Bill Clement took us on. And these are my notes. I'm going to read from this.
Great.
I was on a desert where I saw a small pyramid with glass-like sides and variegated colors on its surfaces. The colors continually shifting on the face of the pyramid. Then Bill told us to see the pyramid large, and I did. I saw all sorts of colors and forms, a range of cool colors. Entering the pyramid, I saw the 4 parts of myself: the physical me, the mental me, which was a younger version of me, more serious and thoughtful, the emotional me, which was a woman, and the spiritual me, an older male with a beard who later became younger and otherworldly. I saw a clear quartz crystal in the center of the pyramid, around which the 4 cells were standing, holding hands. The crystal was our soul. The crystal grew until it was huge, its tip reaching the tip of the pyramid. energy was sent counterclockwise around the circle of 4 cells. Then the 4 cells merged into the soul crystal, and I felt very integrated. I saw a pillar of light in the crystal, white spiraling light rising, and I felt myself rising on the spiral, and I rose through this beam until I reached an ocean of pearl white light, which was the power source. And in the evening, we were again taken back to our power center, and Bill told us to look at the soul crystal and see it opening up. And I saw this happen and saw many spinning configurations of energy, beautiful colors. I think mainly pinks and light blues and crystal whites, slightly reminiscent of the sort of structure of snowflakes.
So when you say that you see things, was it very clear, like a movie, when you were seeing the visualization?
No. I was going to mention that. I don't know about other people, but, based on my clients, I don't think there are very many people who actually can see, like a color movie. I call these thought pictures. And when you get into something very deeply, it's almost like you're seeing it, but you're not really seeing it. People talk about having psychic senses, and this is one of the senses. This is your psychic sight, but it's not. You don't see it like you do with your eyes.
Right.
So.
Thanks for sharing that so people can understand, how because I think a lot of people don't really talk about what that really means to see.
Yeah, I use the word perceive. I don't use the word see, because you perceive on the inside, and your perception may be more than just visual perception. Some people are, a clairaudient and so on. So you have inner perceptions just like you have your regular senses. Mm-hmm. When we finish this particular visualization in the evening, a past student of Pat, a trance medium, dropped by, and he channeled Arthur Ford. And Pat talked with Arthur as if he were sitting right there, and the two of them were joking with each other. So that was pretty strange, let me tell you. So. Let's see, I got a lot of material. I'm not going to be able to use all of it. Oh, okay. Well, two major things that she was teaching us. One was she called it lifting. And lifting means that you're moving up through different levels of consciousness. And first she had us, she would lift us. Then she had us pair up, and we lifted each other as we went through this. And the strange thing about when I was working with a partner was she could see everything I was seeing, and I could see everything she was seeing.
Wow.
So don't ask me to explain how that worked. We were, she taught us a technique to join our energies by joining our hands in a certain way. Oh. But anyway, we saw it, the same thing at the same time. Then also, the first thing you do in a reading, and what you taught us next, was to read each other's eyes. Now, this is very strange. You just look in the other person's eyes, and you start telling the person what it is that you see in them, positive. You never say anything negative. Oh. But you always say positive, and you look in their eyes, and so we did this, went in a circle around reading each other's eyes. And again, the accuracy was, phenomenal. The people would, verify what it was that they were seeing. Mm-hmm. This became very important, which I'll mention a little bit later. But this was a major technique also. Okay, I'm going to skip this next one because it's just too long. Mm-hmm. Let me go on here. Oh, okay. Now, we did practice readings with each other, and I can't remember if I did more than one, but then Pat said strangers were going to come from Durham, and we're going to do readings for them, and I totally freaked out. And I didn't have any confidence whatsoever that I could do it. So I wound up reading for one stranger, and since not enough people came, I also read for two of Pat's adult children. And so the visitor's name from Durham, her name was Leslie, and I sat down opposite her, absolutely terrified, and went through the procedure Pat taught us, and I got no impressions. And so I'm sweating buckets, and I finally remembered that Pat said, you have to start talking to get the flow of impressions. So I said to her, as I tune into your vibrations, and then the images started coming.
Oh.
And I told Leslie I felt her work was connected with something scientific, and she said that she worked in the research triangle. And then I closed my eyes and I got an image. And this image just sat in the middle of my screen and looked at me. And the image was a big dog, a red Irish setter. And Big Red looked at me and I looked at him. and nothing happened. And I finally asked Leslie, does an Irish setter mean anything to you? And she said, yes. We gave one away 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
And great waves of relief flowed through me. And I said, okay, he just wants you to know he's all right. And she didn't say anything. The next image I got was of the sailboat. A little braver, I asked, does a sailboat mean anything to you? She said, yes, I like to sail. And I said, well, you need to do more sailing now. You're overworked and need to relax. And she agreed. And so that's all I can remember of this first quasi professional reading I did. And but all three of the people that I read for, they gave us they gave forms for the people to evaluate us, and all three of the forms, two of them said very good and one said good. So that was okay.
Mm-hmm. Off to a good start.
Yeah. Keep track of time for me, would you? Because
sure, we still have plenty of time.
Because I got a lot of material.
Okay.
Okay. The biggest and the most extraordinary experience during that week was when we came to the final exercise, which took 45 minutes to an hour for each student. We were to individually meet our personal spiritual society, which would work with us in the future from the other side. When my turn came, Pat took me to a room with a large bed on it, told me to lie down on the right-hand side, and then she lay down to my left, and she took my left hand in her right hand and instructed me to send energy to her hand that she had taught us, so we'd be hooked up energetically. And then she instructed me to start lifting with her, and we began our inner ascent. I went upward into a pale whitish golden light, also continual feelings of soft purple, deep rose colors. Then, this is extraordinary. I had the impression of people working around me on the inner plane, as if they were operating on me. Mm-hmm. And a couple of seconds later, Pat told me they were operating on me. And they were operating on my energy field. Mm. And all sorts of energies passed through me at times in different places, through my feet, my first chakra, up through my torso and through my head, later back down my spine and my crown chakra. And I was most clearly aware when they operated on my third eye. I could feel the energy very strongly and felt work being done on me in that area. Then I got the perception of an incision being closed there. Now, I want to stress that I felt this physically. This is not psychically. I could physically feel somebody working on my chakras. Mm-hmm. So that was very strange. And then Pat said she would now take me to my spiritual society, and I really did not perceive them. I just got a sense of them, an impression. And there was a sense of one figure making introductions, and then the energy of a woman coming into a half sphere, very pale, soft, gentle, whitish yellow light. Then there was another large figure of very strong, firm energy. And so there were these five spirits who were my spiritual committee. And all through this, there were different energies moving through me. Very clearly different energies each time, some more dynamic and some softer. And one of the figures, Pat said, was an Oriental, and he asked permission, an Oriental healer, and he asked permission to work through me. And I said, okay, sure, no problem. And so that was totally incredible, you know.
Do you still have a connection to that spiritual society?
I assume I do, because they said they'd be, you know,
always with you.
With me. Yeah. What happened though, and this is kind of interesting. I really, you know, I was so nervous about all this, and I had such reservations about it all, that they had to create situations for me to believe what was happening.
Oh. And
so when I first started giving readings, I got some kind of an energetic feeling from them, which afterwards I didn't get. But they wanted to make sure that I understood something was happening and it wasn't just all my imagination.
Right.
And later on, as I, you know, got more and more confident of what I was doing, I could just suddenly start channeling and not even realize I was channeling. I remember one time I got a booth at the Whole Life Expo in New York City to let people know what I was doing. And this woman came up to me and asked me some question about herself. And I said, well, let me give you for instance, an analogy. And I started talking, giving her what I thought was, you know, a hypothetical. And I'm talking about 5 minutes, and this woman's eyes start getting big. And finally, she blurts out, she says, "You're talking about me." And I said, "Okay, yes, I'm talking about you, okay." So, and also, I remember the last chapter of my first book, The Search for David. I sent the manuscript to a well-known medium who lived in Santa Monica, and asked him for comment. And he wrote back and commented, and he said, "Oh, your last chapter was channeled, wasn't it?"
Wow.
And so I wasn't even aware of it. And so as you get better at it, and I was told this by one of Pat's daughters, she said, you know, when you get better, you'll be much more comfortable. And so at this point, I don't know if who's talking, if I'm talking or if I'm channeling or somebody else is talking. I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now after we got through with this training, we were required to give 8 practice readings. And so I was living in New York then, but I'd moved from Raleigh a couple of years before, so I called 3 friends in Raleigh, and they rounded up 5 of their friends, and a week later I flew to North Carolina, and I did readings for these 8 people. Now, this is where something very strange started very early, because several of the people I read for were star people. They were from other galaxies, and I could see it in their eyes. Every time I met one of these people, it was like stars were twinkling in their eyes. And one person was from a region of light, and I saw the being that was made up of facets of light, rectangular and the vertical facets, flashing on and off in a multitude of colors. Another 2 people came from some place over the top of the head. Looks like it's encased in crystals. And this crown of crystals appeared to be part of their bodies, though the rest of the body looked human. So the readings dealt with past lives, present relationships, and future directions, counseling each person I read for. Now, I want to mention over here that just realized the other day, I started out doing traditional readings, but in each reading, it seemed like I was picking up unusual stuff, either past lives or star people or so on. And after about 14 readings or so, they turned into nothing but past life readings. And so I realized that they had given me traditional information to show me that the information was correct and accurate. If I would have started out simply doing past life readings, I wouldn't know if what I was doing was right or not, or whether it was correct or not, whether it was accurate or not. So I got a mixture of everyday stuff.
Right.
And it's very esoteric stuff. I want to mention one reading I did for a friend of mine, Frances. She was a member of the ARE, and we were part of a Search for God group in Raleigh. And I saw her in a past life as an Etruscan queen. I saw her hands clenched on the arms of a gilded wooden throne, 2 men bound before her entire court behind the men. There had been a plot to overthrow her rule by her brother and son, and when they were exposed, she felt it necessary to execute them in public, ordering both of them beheaded. And as I'm telling her this, I suddenly realized I'd been her son. and she had beheaded me in a past life.
Ouch.
I opened my eyes and I said, Frances, I forgive you for anything you've done, and please forgive me for anything I did.
Oh.
And an expression I had seen on her face, which I never could understand, something slipped from her face. And actually, people say that sometimes they can see the face of a past life personality.
Well, do you remember, I don't know what kind of reading you practiced on me. I think it was the past life. And I remember seeing faces on your face. It's the only time I've ever seen that. As you, and in this case, you held my hands. And you did this kind of past life where I was in some Greek thing. And I remember I read the book that you're getting this material from, The Past Lives of Star People. And I think also what's important is the kinds of readings you give are not really typical type readings. And yet what I found interesting is how it resonated with people.
Yeah. Incidentally, you can sometimes see a face of a person on an actor on stage. So, spirits come through, and I mean, we're not meant to be interacting, with spirits all the time. We're here on Earth to live a physical life, but every so often you get this kind of situation. Okay, let me finish up with Frances. Because it was a total contrast to the beginning. Frances was asking me now questions about her work situation. And as I answered those, some of the responses coming out of me were hilarious. And I want to say but I don't think it was me talking. I think it was that Oriental guy. And at one point, I symbolically saw Frances like a fish floating on its side in water, and heard myself say, no wonder you can't move ahead or see where to go when one eye is pointed at the sky and the other eye is pointed at the bottom of the stagnant pool you're in. And Frances just started laughing like crazy. And when I finished the reading, she said, on a scale of 1 to 10, this was a 10.
Oh, great.
Very, very helpful. Thank you. Okay. So the most interesting phenomenon I encountered in the Raleigh readings was past life personalities of some clients speaking directly to me in my mind. Now, this didn't happen a lot later on, but this demonstrates to me anyway the simultaneity of time, that everything's happening at the same time, and your past self is not the past. There's no past, there's no future, there's no present. It's all at one time. So I got back to New York, and I put an ad in the Village Voice that I was doing readings. And the first person I got, I'll just summarize this. It was a man in his 40s, and he came, and this is unusual. He had two physical problems. I usually don't get people with physical problems. He was only in his 40s, but he was incontinent. And second, he had red marks all over his body, which seemed to have no physical cause. And he was a street vendor who sold hand puppets. I never heard of anything like that before, but that's what he was. So I did a reading, and it turned out in one life he'd been a Roman soldier, with killing often part of his duties. In a second life, he'd been a monk who'd taken vows of nonviolence. And I told the vendor his incontinence was a symbol of the monk's life, since the monk had become incontinent in old age. And the red marks on the vendor's body represented blood, which were symbols of his killing as the Roman soldier. Mm. And so this was a situation where his symptoms were there to remind him of those two lives, since he had never resolved the seeming contradiction between being nonviolent as a monk and killing as a Roman soldier. And that reading had a pretty big impact on me for one reason. It demonstrated that present life conditions and issues are actually signals to people from their higher selves asking the current personality to resolve the issue relating to the problem or condition. In fact, I eventually concluded that there are no problems, that the so-called problems are simply a reminder or a signal from your higher self that you have not resolved some issue or some lesson from a past life, and you're being asked by your higher self to address that issue in the present lifetime. So that's a very, I think, a very important thing for people to understand, that, you're not being cursed by something you were born with or something that happens to you. You're being given this, whatever it is, for you to deal with it and address it. And I think that the present situation today in the United States is exactly that. I think in some ways we're sent Donald Trump for us to all wake up, because if he weren't so crazy, if there were a normal person in the White House, we wouldn't be addressing the problems that we're addressing right at the present time.
It's true. He really has made things escalate to the point where it had to pop. I mean, there was no alternative, really, and there still isn't. And also astrologically, it agrees. United States chart is got Pluto and Capricorn retrograde, and it's supposed to be a sign that we have some debts to pay off, in a sense. I forget what exactly. That goes back to earlier times of misuse of power, and especially in government.
Right. Right. When I first started on my spiritual journey, I got these readings from Marion Starnes, and she said that both she and I gave her a bunch of pictures from my ARE groups, and she said all of these people had been in Atlantis, including me and her, and we had all misused our powers in Atlantis. And she said we had come back now in order to try to atone for our misuse of powers and to do something positive this time around. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things, as a side note, that I want to mention, I've mentioned it before, but I want to mention again. There are, everybody thinks that they have a certain agenda here on the planet on the physical level. But that's not the agenda. The real agenda is a spiritual agenda, which is sub rosa. And unless you're looking for it, you don't see it. It's sort of like a computer program. You know, you're seeing what the computer program is putting on your computer screen, but you're not aware of the program that's creating the picture on the screen. So that physical life is like the picture on the screen of your computer, but the software is the spiritual agenda. And so people should always be aware of the fact, whatever is happening, for better or for worse, there's another agenda. Whatever you're seeing is not what's happening. It can be totally different.
I think that's true. And I think, however, that's part of the message of Aquarius. My understanding of the age of Aquarius astrologically is, in the age of Pisces, one of the differences, Pisces is a water sign and Aquarius is an air sign, and it's very electrical. And this woman was talking about healing and how Aquarius is more about energy and how we're meant to really work with energy in a different way. And she used the example of, moving away from like liquid-based vaccines and things to energy healing. Not saying, of course, that vaccines are bad, but just that there would be more things developing through energy methods. And so what you're saying to me is very similar, that we need to look at the energy underneath things, what's really happening underneath, because it isn't always so literal or so obvious.
Yeah, give a simple example. You do something in a past life. Oh, I'll pick my older son, Eric. Marion said that Eric and I had been priests, I think, in Atlantis. And we had been enemies. And that we had come back into this life to learn to be friends. Now, who the heck would figure that out? So that's what I mean. Sometimes you can figure out what the agenda is.
Sure.
But very often the agenda, you come in with certain aspects of an agenda, and then you have to go and work on it. Okay, now, I want to describe how I experience the process of these past life readings, since it's a little mysterious. I close my eyelids and go through the inner steps Pat taught me. Then I open my eyes briefly, read my client's eyes, telling her positive things I sense about her. And then after a few readings, I learned to focus on a person's left eye, since the information seemed to flow from there. I don't know why, but it was always a left eye. And looking into that eye, I'd often sense that my client's energy was very low, and that feelings of hopelessness, despair, fear, or anger might also be present. Next, I'd notice a shift of energy in the left eye that often made the eye look like it was suddenly bulging out. And then the eye would seem to change, and I would feel as if I were looking into someone else's eye. And that's when I'd normally close my eyes again. And then I'd focus on the left of my inner screen, where the visual story always began. It always began at the upper left corner of the screen. I don't understand why, but that's where it always started. And what I saw were, as I mentioned earlier, thought pictures, which would usually be something like looking at silhouettes through a lightly steamed window pane. Although the impressions later often become almost as vivid as a picture. And as I continued with the reading, I go into a deeper trance. I mean, I was always conscious, but I'd go deeper in, and consequently, I'd be getting clearer images, perceptions.
There seems to be a question Michael has, or someone has.
Yeah, one of our viewers has a question, and they want to know, how do we correct past life problems when we don't know what they are? And then she also wanted to know if the man that had the physical ailments was able to correct those.
Well, unfortunately, virtually nobody who gets a reading comes back, to tell you what happened. I only had one case where I got some feedback from the person. What was the first part? How can you tell? Well, look and see what you're doing. Try to look at yourself like you're looking at a stranger, and say, what am I doing here? And try to see what it is that you're not dealing with in your life. And if you really want to find out what's going on, I have a CD that's available on Amazon, and you can regress yourself. It's very, very accurate. It's very comprehensive, and it's based on the actual techniques that I use in past life regressions. But simply put, if there's something that's not working for you, that's what you need to work with. I mean, that's as simple as you can get. It doesn't matter, what the particular story is. Well, let me give you just a simple example. I knew a woman a number of years ago, and we had regressed each other, and I did a regression with her, and she was in the process of divorcing her husband. And when I regressed her, she found out she had been with this same entity, her husband, 6 previous lifetimes. This was the 7th time the two were together, and they had never resolved whatever their problem was. In one life, he had been her father, and he had smashed his head in with a rock. Oh. And they had been married several times before, so they'd been together 7 times, and they still hadn't resolved it. You really have to look and see what is it that I'm not doing. You can't do anything about the other person. You have to say to yourself, what am I doing wrong? What is it that I am not dealing with? I'll pick an example. It's a minor sort of thing, but when I was young, I was pretty shy, and I had trouble relating to people, and so I wasn't aware of that at the time. I wasn't really aware of it. It's looking back on it that I realized it was. But when I got to college, in the middle of my second year, I tried out for a play, and I got a role. I got a leading role, and I went on to get 3 other roles. 2 of them were major roles, and that sort of dealt with my shyness, because I could get up on a stage in front of a huge number of people and not be concerned about what they thought about me. Mainly because I was hiding behind a character, of course. But so you have to look at yourself and say, what am I doing that isn't productive for me? And that's about the best I can tell you without doing a past life reading or a past life regression. Okay, then to continue. Then I don't understand why this was, but most of the time when I would see somebody in a past life in a reading, they'd be outdoors, and I don't know why. And a lot of times they'd be outdoors and standing on a hill or something like that. Then the figure would start walking at about a 30-degree upward angle toward the right of my screen, and then the story would start unrolling. Now, the receiving information this way is not an ordinary mental process. Pat had spoken to us about what she called knowings, that without any input, including your own knowledge, you would suddenly know something. Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute used to talk about thought balls, which could be thrown at others and caught by others. I sometimes use the term mental gestalt. Dr. Brew Joy, in his book Joy's Way, wrote that telepathy is capable of impressing in a single moment the totality of what is to be communicated, which is, in effect, the thought ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm convinced that this is how geniuses receive their great ideas.
Mm.
So I'm sure at one time or another you've seen a comic strip in which a light bulb is suspended over the head of a character to indicate
Sure.
to the character getting an idea. That's exactly what happens.
Ah.
Sometimes I would be talking to a client, and all of a sudden I get this impression of this sparking right in the top of my head between the left and right brain. And sometimes I would even suddenly say, oh. And I wouldn't know why I'm saying, oh, because the thought ball has to be unwound. It's like a ball of yarn.
Mm.
And so then your left brain unwinds this ball of yarn, this thought ball, and puts it in a linear form so that you can communicate it to another person. And the thought ball does not contain any images or sounds or anything. It's all energy, and your left brain has to separate it out and then convey it to somebody else that way. So that is how telepathy works using the human brain.
Mm. It's fascinating. I never knew any of this when I did take a look at your book, Past Lives of Star People, and it's just really amazing the experiences you go through.
Yeah. So let me see what we got. How much time we got left?
We have about 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay. Let me skip over. There was, I'm just going to summarize just in a moment, a young guy who I did a reading for in New York, and he was a dancer. And he wanted to know, he said he got 2 job offers, one with a small company and one with a large company. And he wanted to know which job he should take. And I got him in a past life as one of the followers of Jesus. And Jesus taught him how to elevate out of his body, elevate his energy body out of his physical body, sort of like a balloon going up on a tether.
Mm-hmm.
And he would elevate up, I don't know, maybe 100 feet, something like that. I don't remember. Anyway, he'd elevate up in the air, and he would act as a transducer. And he would take energy from the universe and send it to healers who were working with Jesus. So he was actually acting as a transducer to send healing energy for others to heal people with. I thought that was pretty extraordinary. Mm-hmm. I never read anything like that before. And so I remember during the reading, I suddenly started laughing. And the guy says, "What are you laughing at?" And I said, "I'm seeing Jesus, and he's throwing the money changers table all over the place." And I was just laughing because he was serious, you know. But I always felt Jesus has a great sense of humor. So anyway, that's just an aside. And so he was, but now I want to show you what I mean about the 2 different agendas. This guy, Terry, the dancer, is asking me about an everyday thing. Should I take this job? Should I not take this job? Mm-hmm. But what I was told to tell him is that with the healing that he was doing back in Jesus' time, he was doing unconsciously in the present, and that he should become aware of this and do healing as he is dancing and send out healing to his audiences.
Wow.
That just shows you the different agendas, the physical agenda and the mm-hmm. spiritual agenda of the 2. And so I told him he'd be successful. And 20 years later, when the internet came along, I got curious one day, and I dug out my notes, and I still had his name, and I looked up his name, and it turned out he'd become a successful choreographer.
Wow, that's really wonderful. Yeah, I remember that story.
Yeah. So now it's just one last thing. Let me just hold on one second.
Sure. Now, people that are interested in finding out more about my dad, the best place is to go and get some of his books on Amazon. There's actually quite a few connected to past life. They're really reasonable and affordable. So that's what I would recommend. Some of them are just in Kindle, so you'd have to download the Kindle app if you don't have a Kindle, but you certainly can do that on computers now.
And it's free.
Yes, it is.
The app is free.
The app is free.
Okay, I just want to mention, we don't have enough time to get into specific, but I just want to mention a group of readings, which is what a lot of my book is about, of these star people. I met this lady, her name was Margaret. I met her at the Monroe Institute when I was there for a week on one of their programs. And she asked me to come up to Connecticut, where she lived, to give readings for her and for 7 people. And most of these people were scientists. And as it turned out, all but one person had come from somewhere else. And I'm going to read you where they came from and what was involved. First guy I read for was a guy named Rod. He came from Orion. Doreen came from Arcturus. Kara came from the spatial realm. Don't ask me what that is. I just know that's what it was. Paula came from the crystal realm. Leslie came from Alpha Centauri. And Margaret herself was an intergalactic leader. And she had organized this group back wherever they were because she was a member of an intergalactic council. And so she knew all these people. And they all came here. Now, the interesting thing about all of them, I want to summarize, is that each of these individuals is here to do something to do with energy. And I don't mean just simple things like healing energy, but they actually work with others, usually unconsciously, on inner levels to create energy structures. And the analogy I have, I don't know if it applies to all the universe, but it applies to the Earth. It's like you've got a giant Lego puzzle, Lego set, and you have all these pieces of Legos. And if you imagine that this Lego, instead of being physical, is a piece of energy, you know that with Legos, you can make all kinds of structures. And the more Legos you have, the bigger the structure and more complicated it is. And all of these people are here to work with energy like this Lego structure to create energies, I believe, to raise the level of the Earth's vibration and to forward the energetic evolution of the planet so that I once had a experience of being sent to the future, 10,000 years in the future. And when I was sent 10,000 years in the future, I saw that physical matter no longer existed the way it exists now. It had all been made more rapid, and so it was less dense, and it was like everything was shining because the light was coming through. So anyway, all these people were here to create these various kinds of energy structures, some of which they had worked with before. Now, I'll read you some of the subject matter that's in the book.
We have 1 minute.
Okay. Doreen the transducer beamed up to a flying saucer, mapping Earth's inner energies. Paula materialized full-grown in 300 BC, Greece, a friend of Jesus, sampling time, underground cities, constructing energies. One person jumped into a tiger to feel to find out what it felt like to be a tiger. And one changed history. So these are fascinating things. I don't know what it was, but it seemed like all of these people were during about a 6-month period. Not only in Connecticut, but some other people as well. And after that, I never had any.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on again, Dad. And if anyone wants to read more about this particular episode, you can get it through The Past Lives of Star People. The stories are there in that short and very fascinating book. But thanks again, Dad, for sharing all the information and being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We will have you back again. And thank you all for listening. And please take care of yourselves and your loved ones and stay safe in these changing times. Until next time, please continue to enjoy and explore the esoteric and the obscure.